There was an empire that once stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Black Sea, from the snowfields of Siberia to the burning deserts of Persia, an empire that built no palaces, needed no but made all of humanity shudder when their horses galloped past. There, the horse is the bed, the friend, the weapon, and death is just a stop on the endless journey. No warm breakfast, no prayer rituals, just smoke, mist, dried meat, and survival. Today, the drop of water from the origin would like to take you back to the middle of the 13th century, where the wind never stops blowing and history is written in horse hooves. You will wake up among cavalry, eat meat from the fires of war, sit under the tent of king, and see the world shake through the eyes of an empire that has never known fear. This is not just a journey through history, but it's a test of imagination, courage, and the big question, can you survive a day? Part 1. Waking up in the Mongol Empire. Imagine waking up not in a soft bed, but in the middle of a vast steppe, where the ground is still marked by the hoofprints of horses from the night before. The morning wind has not yet died down. The sun is not yet strong enough to dispel the chill that lingers on every blade of dry grass. And at that moment, you realize you are in the middle of the 13th century, in the heart of the Mongol Empire, an unparalleled war machine where survival is not an option, but a duty, near the Annan River, the source of so many legends. You wake up to a cold smoke and the scent of old wool, mixed with the smell of animals. The coat you wrap around you is made of stiff sheep's wool, stained with sweat, goat fat, and time. You are not alone. Beside you is your horse, not just a vehicle but a companion of fire. And if provisions are lacking, even a meal, no one wakes you. No one says good morning. In this empire, words are a luxury. They live without explanation, only movement. The Mongols are born on horseback. By the time you learn to stand, the children here are galloping across the steppe. It is not a talent, it is a necessity. You drag yourself out of your frozen sleep, wincing as you step onto the icy ground. The horse snorts in your face, unceremoniously. It steps over your feet, accidentally stepping on your cloak. It doesn't apologize. In this world, no one does. Politeness is absent. Instead, there is discipline. There is habit. There is inhuman rigidity. But that is what makes the empire strong. When you finally mount your horse, the caravan has begun to move away silently, without a signal, without a word. The wind from the north whips your face like icy whips. There is no road to follow, only vague direction and the rhythm of the cavalry. Hills appear and disappear, and you have to change horses again and again. Not because you are tired, but because the horse is tired. In Mongolia, you have to be more resilient than your horse breakfast. Oh, no toast or hot tea. Maybe some meat so dry it felt like you were chewing on old leather. And a leather pouch of a milky liquid, slightly bubbling and sour with a smell of sweat and fermented grass. Fermented mare's milk, what they called children, old men, warriors. Everyone drank it, not because they liked it, but because there was nothing else to live for. This is no place for the weak. You must not slow down. You must not fall off your horse. You must not complain, because if you fall, the wheels of time will not stop. The army will continue. No one will look back. People will only mumble. The wolves must have come sooner than expected. Cruel, maybe. But in a land where winter is not only cold but can devour your soul, survival is never easy. The journey continues. With every hilltop, every cutting wind, every heart pounding with cold and hunger, you begin to understand. This is not an empire built on swords. It is built on endurance, by people who need no shelter, by warriors born in the harshest of environments, who live like the wind and die like dust. There were no fluttering flags, no marching songs, just hooves, silent eyes, and an unspoken belief that however vast the world may be, it can be conquered, one gallop at a time. You're not dead. That means you passed the first test. But here, surviving isn't the end. It's just the beginning. Part 2. Eat or endure. If there is one thing that strikes us moderns as we enter the world of 13th century Mongolia, it is the food. In the empire of horses, you don't eat to enjoy yourself. You eat to survive. And often, surviving breakfast is harder than surviving a battle. The sun has barely risen above the horizon when a leather pouch is thrust into your hands. Inside is a milky, slightly bubbling liquid that smells strongly of horse sweat and rotting summer. Fermented mare's milk. This is no vintage wine. It's the fermented liquid of migration and battle. You take a sip, and your throat burns like you've swallowed thorns. But you can't refuse. Not because anyone has forced you to, but because refusing would mean you can't keep up. And that's just the appetizer. The main course of the morning, if you can call it that, is a hunk of mutton so dry you could drive a nail into it. No one asks if you want it. They hand it over, you take it, you chew. And you notice, after 20 minutes, the meat hasn't gotten smaller. Just wet. It doesn't taste any different. It's just you who's changing, more resilient, or more desperate. Next to it, you might be offered a white lump as hard as a rock curd, a fermented yogurt dried in the hot sun. Biting into it, you hear your teeth protest. It's sour, crunchy like gravel, and leaves a powdery lime taste in your mouth. For the Mongols, this is a field food. For you, it's a test of your faith and taste. There is no table, no tablecloth, no spoons, no chopsticks. You sit on the ground, picking at your food, dodging the draft. The smell of breakfast does not waft through the air like a stew in a fairy tale. It is thick and murky, as if the whole world is boiling in a pot of bones somewhere back at the main camp. Ahead of you, a gaunt old man has finished eating by the time you reach trying to break off a piece of meat. He's sharpening his knife, his face stony, his hands slow as if performing a sacred ritual. His gaze without words is a warning. Eat, hurry. We have more to go. Here, mealtime is a rare luxury. Mongols don't eat to fill up, they eat to survive. Meals are not a time for conversation. No one asks if you like it, because everyone knows it doesn't. And if you ask what the dish is made of, the only answer you'll get is a cold stare. Or worse, no more for next time. This is a land where silence is respected, where extra words can make you look weak in the eyes of others. They eat quickly, eating with a ready posture. Even while chewing, their hands are still on the reins. Even while swallowing, their eyes are still on the horizon. And so you learn to pretend you're full. Learn to see every grease stain on your sleeve. As a sign of life, learn not to cry. Not because you're tough, but because the tears will freeze before they hit the ground. In the summer, sweat flows in streams, but no one stops. In the winter, lips are chapped, tongues are frozen, but you still have to eat. Because if you don't eat, you can't ride. If you don't ride, you'll be left behind. And being left behind on the Mongolian steppe is not an option. Finally, you wrap the leftovers in a leather bag, tying it tightly to your waist not to save them. But as a reminder, in this world, everything is precious. Even the things you once thought were inedible. You are not full, you are not happy, but you are alive. And here, living, however precariously, however miserably, is a small victory. Part 3. Mongolian personal hygiene in history. We often talk about great things, feats, leaders, and kings. But there are small, seemingly insignificant things that reveal the deeper nature of a culture. And in the case of the Mongol Empire, nothing illustrates this better than bathing on the vast steppe where the wind cuts like a knife and water is more precious than gold. Personal hygiene is not measured by the number of baths you take, but by the number of times you don't die of infection. Clean is a very relative term. No soap, no scented towels, no hot springs. Want to wash your face? Use your sleeve. Want to scrub your skin? Use sand. Want to wash your hair? Wait for the next big rain or spring. Body odor is not something to be ashamed of. It is, in fact, the invisible uniform of the entire army. You smell leather, smoke, horse grease, and human body. A symphony of strong odors that, strangely, make you fit in. Here, if someone smells of flowers, it is not a fragrant person. It is a suspect, a spy, or worse, someone who does not belong. Hair is another story. Unwashed, but always tied back, tight, and clean in the sense of unobstructed. Under the fur cap, your head is always hot and damp. Lice, inevitably. But you don't kill them, you manage them. You part your hair, find them, pull them out, sometimes even name them, and toss them into the fire during late afternoon chats. It's a comical, sacred act, and a reflection of the Mongol way of embracing nature and not fighting it. Your hands and feet are always dirty. Your fingernails are covered in dried blood, dirt, and congealed grease. But no one complains. No one looks at you like you've just come out of hell because they look like you have to. The dirtiness isn't a shame, it's a sign that you're living, riding, fighting. As for clothes, you don't change. You add more. A sweater that has been worn for 3 winters is still considered good if it has fallen apart. The blood from last season, this argument with the old goat, is still imprinted on the sleeve. Like a medal, you don't throw away old clothes. You add furs, goatskins, furs, and tie them up with leather straps. Winter, layer upon layer. Summer, peeling off layers like an onion. But the smell is still there. And your teeth, no toothbrush, no toothpaste. You chew on bones, drink sour rag, hoping its natural acidity will loosen whatever's stuck between your teeth. Got a bad tooth, no dentist. Just a knife. A Mongol warrior carries a knife with him, not just to kill his enemies, but to deal with a traitorous tooth when it starts to ache all night. Where you once believed cleanliness was a measure of civilization, here dirt is a symbol of strength, proof that you're one with nature, not trying to escape it. And the strangest thing, no one complains about your smell because they can't smell anything but themselves. In the cold steppe, you don't need perfume, you need a layer of lamb fat to keep you warm. You don't need a towel, just a pinch of ash to soothe your windburned skin. You don't fear dirt, you fear weakness. Because in the Mongol Empire, the weak are those who don't survive long enough to stink. Part 4. The first battle in a world where every heartbeat is a horse's stride. War is not a surprise, it is inevitable. And for the Mongols, fighting is not about heroism. It's about survival, it's about expanding borders. It's about reminding the world that the winds of the steppe don't just blow, they can topple entire dynasties. The morning drags on without warning. You ride without stopping. Your legs numb from the cold and your saddle hot as rock. You have no destination. No one speaks, no map, no written strategy. But you sense something approaching. The horizon ahead is blurred with dust. A cluster of black dots moves. Not cattle. Cavalry, no bugles, no heroic shouts, no shouts of charge. Each man simply bows his head, reaches out to grasp his bow. You do the same. The Mongol bow is small, curved, heavy, and haunting, made of horn, sinew, and will. It does not forgive weakness. It does not admit mistakes. You pull the string and all the while, the horse gallops madly beneath you. No one stops to aim. No one gets their bearings. You twist your hips, tilt your shoulders, and release the arrow as your horse flies across the ground. The arrow flies through the cold wind, through nothingness, and you don't know if it hits. You don't have time to care. The enemy is approaching, but you do not charge. The Mongols do not attack, hit. They move, feign retreat, as if running, then turn back in a split second, shooting arrows into the faces of those who thought they were chasing victory. Battle is a dance. There are no screams, no tears, just the plucking of the bowstring like a vicious harp, and the fading groans of the wounded. Blood does not flow epically. It just drips to the ground, silently like a drizzle. You do not count the dead. No one counts. There are no scoreboards, no medals. There is only one question. Do you survive? Your arrows are not as sharp as they are praised, but they are poisonous. The wound is small, but it will kill the enemy slowly, not out of hatred, but out of strategy. Wound one soldier, and to carry him. 3 men ineffective, 1 arrow. That is mathematics, not heroics. Your quiver dwindles. Your hands blistered and bleed, but you keep going because if you stop, you die. And if you die, no one stops to mourn. Life here runs on hoofbeats and blood. No one has time for sadness. The battle ends without a final whistle. No one shouts victory. There are just no more people rushing in. You catch your breath, silently wiping the bloody arrow on your jacket, which is already stained red. No one congratulates you. No one pats you on the back. Everyone just turns away, looking for food, adjusting their saddles, or resting next to their wheezing, tired horses. You realize, for the Mongols, victory is not something to celebrate. It is the next step. After the war, there is more riding. After the riding, there is camping. After camping, there is more riding. The circle never ends. Not because they are killing machines, but because they are children of the steppe, and the steppe is constantly moving. At night, the campfire, the smell of roasting meat mingles with the smell of blood, sweat, and ashes. You sit there, in the firelight, among the silent night. No one recounts the battle. No one mentions death. Because here, war is not a chapter of history. It is the pulse of the empire. Part 5. Dinner after the war. After the battle was over, there were no banners flying in victory, no songs of triumph. There was only the slow rhythm of horses returning to camp. Tired eyes fixed on the fire, and a very special smell began to spread, the smell of burning meat, melting fat and ashes mixed with the night wind. It was a sign that dinner had begun. In the Mongol Empire, dinner was not a reward for victory, but a requirement for surviving until morning. No one served. No one cleared the table. You ate what you killed, or what your comrades killed for you. If you didn't kill anything, no worries. As long as you were still there, you got your share. But in return, you had to participate in the preparation. A goat is brought in, without fear. You don't know if it was killed from hunger or because it strayed into the gaze of a grumpy warrior. You are handed a knife. No one tells you what to do. You learn by watching. Skinning, butchering, bone picking, no anatomical diagrams. Just expert cuts passed down through the centuries in the heat and the frost. The first piece of meat is not the best, but it is the first to be thrown on the fire because everyone is hungry. There are no spices. There is no sauce. The fire is the only cook. When the meat has lost its blood, someone picks it up, bites it, chews it. No praise, no criticism. Whoever feels the meat is done, it is done. You are handed a rib. The grease sticks to your hand, runs down your sleeve, but you don't wipe it away. Your sleeve is a napkin, a tablecloth, a blanket, your past, your present, and perhaps your future if you survive the coming winter. Someone threw a spare bone behind him. A dog barked and grabbed it. No one cared. Dogs were part of the camp. They gnawed on bones. They barked at strangers. They died when they needed meat. The circle of life here had no clear boundary between man and beast. You are handed a piece of organ. No one says whether it is liver or heart, maybe kidney, but you don't ask. In the Mongol Empire, curiosity was a sign of being too new, not yet knowing that survival didn't require knowing the name of the food, just swallowing it. Sitting around the fire, no one tells stories. No one remembers the battle. All eyes are on the embers as if in anticipation, or simply because there is nothing else to look at. The wind still blows. The moonlight shatters on the upright saddle. In your hand, the bone shrinks. In your belly, hunger remains. But that is not a bad thing. Here, being full is not the goal. Being full is weakness. Being hungry means you still have enough strength to continue. You burp quietly. Someone nearby burps too. No one seems surprised. In the long silence of a night without music or music, the burp is the only way to acknowledge, I ate. As the fire dies down, as the bones are thrown to the dogs, and the ashes blow in the wind, you curl up in your coat, soaked with the smell of blood, grease, and smoke. Beside you is your horse, eating, sleeping, and keeping watch. And in your half-awake sleep, you dream, not of peace, but of meat. For in the Mongol Empire, dreams are not woven of flowers and butterflies, but of the next meal. And if you are lucky, you will live to eat it. Part 6. Winter's coming. Winter on the steppe does not come like a sad love song with silent snowfall. It comes like a sentence. No warning, no bells. Just one night, when you take off your shoes to sleep. The next morning, your shoes are frozen, solid as stone. Your toes lose feeling. Your will begins to falter. In other lands, the cold is a temporary ordeal, a need for a fireplace, a need for a coat. But here, where there are no forests to chop wood, no stone walls to block the wind, the cold is a predator. It doesn't just make you shiver, it whispers into your ribs every night. You don't belong here. The Mongols knew this. They did not fight the cold. They lived with it. They did not collect firewood. They burned dung. Cow dung, horse dung, goat dung. The smell was terrible, but the heat was real. And on a night when the wind was biting, the betrayal of the sense of smell was more tolerable than death by frostbite. You learned to layer your clothes as if you were a woolen doll. Furs, more wool, more scarves, more lanolin to keep the wind out. Your fingers have lost feeling by your toes. Maybe they've been gone since yesterday, you don't care. If you can walk, you walk. If you don't feel pain, you're glad, because pain means your body is still fighting. Death is very near. Sleep, it's no longer a mere act. It's a survival ritual. You don't sleep next to a horse. You sleep with it. You press your back against its flank, using its warm heartbeat as a living furnace. The stench, the fur, the sweat congealing on the back of your shirt, it all becomes a blanket. There's no room for embarrassment or disgust, just the instinct to stay alive. The sun still rises every day, but only to illuminate the night. The light brings no warmth. It only helps you see the ice on your saddle, your reins, your beard. Your eyes are dry, your nose is chapped, your lips are bleeding, but you do not complain. Complaining is a luxury. Complaining means you have the energy to complain. And here, energy is something you dare not waste. The horses were different. They did not care. They trampled the snow, gnawed at the roots of the dead grass, sneezed into the cold wind without shivering. In the bitter cold, they were unperturbed spirits, carrying the nearly petrified warriors on their backs, galloping across the desert like wind-scorched ghosts. The cold silenced you. No more jokes, no more laughter, no more heavy breathing. Every movement became slow, not because of fatigue, but because any extra movement could take away the last bit of warmth you had left. The silence spread like a thick white blanket, covering the entire army. And then you realize, the Mongols are not afraid of the cold because they have become a part of it. They do not let it defeat them. They let it shape them. It is not the strongest who survives, but the quietest. The one who knows that to speak of pain is to lose it. To keep it in your heart is to keep going. Winter here has no... It does not melt away in the sun. It retreats, slowly, like an enemy that knows it will return, perhaps soon. And you, if you survive, don't celebrate. You don't say, I made it through the winter. You just sigh, adjust your belt, and climb back into the saddle. Because in the Mongol Empire, there are no rewards for there is only the next stage. Part 7. Meet Kayan. You don't enter a marble palace. There are no towering columns or gilded ceilings. The Mongolian capital is not made of bricks. It's made of wool, leather, and rope that binds a world together. Khan's camp is in the middle of the steppe, larger than the others, but not ostentatious. And the tent door always faces south. It's convention. It's order. Inside there was no carved dragon throne, just a low, rough wooden platform where a man sat cross-legged, slowly chewing on dried meat. His face was unadorned. His beard was his fur coat was caked with dust and dried blood. If he hadn't been introduced, you would have taken him for an old shepherd weary from a long day. But there was no mistaking him. This is Khan, general, statesman, and nightmare of the entire Eurasian continent. He didn't shout. He didn't shout. When he spoke, the camp fell silent. Because if you didn't hear it, it was your fault. No one repeated, no one explained. Smart people learn to listen as if their lives depended on every syllable. And often they did. The order was not a speech. It was not a 1,000-word edict. Just a few words, sharp as knives. Go west, receive tribute, burn the camp. Do not return until it is finished. That's not a demand. That's the truth. You stand in the middle of the tent, head bowed. Don't look him in the eye for long. Say nothing unless asked. And if he calls you Harry for 6 months straight instead of remembering your name, you nod. No one corrects Khan, not out of fear, but because no one thinks he could be wrong. The air in the tent was thick with a scent of furs and fire. Maps hung on the walls, not in ink on silk, but in dried leather, rope, and hand-carved pieces of wood. Rivers meandered, mountains were marked with iron spikes, and cities were just dots, scarily small. 4KHN. Every kingdom was potential to ashes. You see him staring at the map, his eyes scanning the unknown lands. To him, rivers are transport routes. Mountains are obstacles to be circumvented. Political boundaries are a joke invented by the weak to withstand the wind. When the meeting begins, you take no notes. An assistant stands by, holding a sharpened bone and a piece of old parchment. Writing down orders is like carving a spell into the world. No one repeats them. Everything has to be right the first time, because mistakes don't lead to blame, they lead to blood. A warrior sneezes in the middle of the session. There is a long silence. When you turn around, he is gone. No one says anything. No one asks any questions. Everyone just nods silently and continues listening. Khan's existence was what held the empire together. There were no monuments to him, but every horse's hoofprint. He did not speak of emotion. He did not mention humanity. He asked, "Has the city fallen? Have the horses been fed? Have the letters been delivered?" If the answer was no, you had to provide evidence of a missing arm or a more compelling reason. If you wanted to live. When the session ends, no one says goodbye, no one smiles. Each person leaves silently, their faces as if they have just left a ritual. You walk out of the tent, carrying no reward, no praise, only orders. And here, one command is enough to rewrite the map. Part 8. Mongolian diplomacy. If you were a medieval envoy, velvet-robed, soft-spoken, trained to bow and pay compliments, forget all that when you stand before a Mongol general's tent. Here, diplomacy begins, not with your majesty, but with, "We come before you regret it." The Mongols had emissaries, letters, and rituals, but make no mistake, they did not use them to plead. They used them to declare. A Mongol diplomatic delegation did not travel alone. They rode in groups, in dark armor, bows in hand, not looking around, only straight ahead, as if the world were being classified. Ours and soon to be ours. The letter they carried was not long. No mention of ancestors or justice. No mention of God. Just a few lines. Short, cold, like the prairie wind. Archaean sends word, open the gates, pay tribute, or be destroyed. Polite in their own way. Clear, no nonsense. A way of speaking that leaves no room for misunderstanding. If the recipients are smart, they will do as they are told. Send horses, gold, cloth, or simply bow and say, "We are happy to be your subjects." And so, no blood is shed. Sometimes, the right to rule is retained as long as they remember who is really in charge. But what if the recipient is stupid? They laugh at him, tear up the letter, cut down the messenger. Cain does not get angry. He does not scream. He just frowns, nods, and says 3 words. Go back there. And so, the 40,000 horsemen quietly set off, without hatred, without emotion, without marching songs. This is Mongolian diplomacy. One offer only, one chance only. No second chances, no reattempts, no corrections. History books also record that once a city-state refused a letter demanding tribute, 3 months later, that city was no longer on the map. The population was pushed out into the grasslands, and those who survived were hired as horsekeepers if they were lucky. The ruler was never mentioned again. Perhaps his name had turned to dust, blown away by the wind, but not everyone refused. Many kingdoms, from Persia to China, from Kiev to the Central Asian states, chose to surrender, and strangely enough they lived. The Mongols did not kill anyone unnecessarily. They needed tax collectors, merchants, blacksmiths, interpreters, but only if you knew your place, only if you did not lecture them on how to behave. You quickly learn that, in this empire, pride cannot save the citadel. Pride cannot stop the galloping horses. And the most expensive lesson is, the silence in KN's brief letter is the thunder waiting behind. A letter, read correctly, is a chance for survival. Read incorrectly, an obituary not yet written. No need for hammers, no need to start bloodshed. The Mongols understood that fear is the fastest horse. A well-timed letter could bring down a fortress. And the scariest thing, they kept their word. You stand there, perhaps as the recipient of the letter, perhaps as the one accompanying the delegation. Whatever your role, you understand. All the diplomacy here is just a thin smokescreen to hide the real nature. War is knocking at the door, and when it comes, it needs no further explanation. Part 9. Karakoram capital, heart of the empire. If you are used to capitals like the magnificent Baghdad, the splendid Chang'an, or the ancient Rome's with their squares, arenas, stone columns, and church bells ringing every morning, then Karakoram, the capital of the Mongol Empire, will be a shock, a silent rupture in your imagination. There are no walls, there are no palaces, there are no gilded mosques or temples. Karakoram is not built of stone, but of tents, pines, leather straps, and morning dew. If you rode through it, you might not even know you were passing through the heart of one of the greatest empires in human history. The tents here were not shelters, they were places of command. Each tent was a conference room, an administrative office, a repository of knowledge and, of course, a place where the great figures slept. In the middle of the camp stood Khan's tent, no taller than the ordinary ones, no different in color, but all paths led to it, like veins leading to the heart. There were no paved avenues, only hoofprints, wooden carts sunk into the ground, and the warm remains of ashes. The people here did not need maps to run an empire that stretched from the Danube to the shores of the Yellow Sea. They had memories, and they had a network of messengers faster than any dynasty that had ever existed. You ask, how could such an empire survive amid wind, sand, and tents? The answer is mobility. Karakoram is not built, it is built whenever it stops, and when it leaves it is gone as if it had never existed. No one can surround it. No one can attack the heart when the heart moves. That is what makes Karakoram a survival strategy, not just a place. Inside the tent, you won't find statues or murals, but you will find letters from China, maps from Persia, tax lists from Kiev, and rare items from India to Damascus. This is where the world comes together not for show, but for a simple purpose: control. Everything in Karakoram revolved around speed and efficiency. Officials were chosen not for their nobility or bloodline, but for their talent, their memory, their ability to communicate in 5 languages. A Mongol could give an order in Turkish, receive a reply in Chinese, then ride west and explain it in Persian all in the same week. Karakoram doesn't need glory, it needs performance. Here you would meet people called Yamrunus equestrian messengers who took turns carrying messages thousands of miles, each stop a day's ride away. The system was called the Yamakurias, precursor to the modern express service. Khan's letters could reach Vienna before a Western king could dismount. And every morning, before the sun had fully risen, the camp stirred. The tents were dismantled, the axles were oiled, the furnaces were put out. Karakoram moved, like a beating heart, pumping blood throughout the body of the empire. It did not need to stay in one place. For the empire did not need a capital that did not change. It needed a capital that could travel with its army to the horizon. Outsiders often laugh at the poverty of Karakoram, but they don't understand it's not poverty, it's a refusal to be fixed. Because fixed is the goal, and the goal is to conquer. The Mongols don't put themselves in a position to be conquered, and you after riding through this land, eating from clay pots and ash fires, hearing orders passed like Bibles between the kitchen camp and the chieftainess tent understand. It is not the palace that is power. Power is the ability to command without walls. Part 10. Law and Justice. You might think that. With an empire that rode restlessly, camped restlessly, and moved like the wind without a shadow, the laws would be laxed, emotional, and provisional. But you would be mistaken, and mistaken dangerously. The Mongol Empire had laws, and their laws were not vague. They were called Yasa, supreme orders given by Khan, committed to collective memory. Never written down, but never forgotten. You are not allowed to steal. You are not allowed to harm the messenger. You are not allowed to lie in disputes. You are not allowed to let soldiers cause trouble for civilians. The law has no frills, no small sections, no exceptions for relatives. But most importantly, the law is enforced immediately. You steal a horse? No trial, no defense, no hardship plea. The owner just has to prove it's his horse with a scar, a bridle, or a horse's recognition sound. If he's right, you lose your finger next time you hand, and if the horse is killed, your life goes with it. Cruel? No. This is steppe justice. Swift, clear, uncorrupted. The judges called Jarguchi do not wear black robes, do not sit behind a raised platform. They can be a warrior, an old man, or even an old woman. As long as their voice is respected, you present your case. They listen, ask a few questions, and then make a decision. And when the decision is made, everyone accepts it. Because if you do not obey, you are not only insulting an individual, you are insulting the tribe, the camp, the prestige of Khan. The amazing thing is, the Mongols could apply the same set of laws to their cavalry, merchants, blacksmiths, and conquered towns. They did not need to change the laws every time they conquered a new land. The laws went with the tents, horses, and bows. And strangely enough, it created stability. Merchants felt safe. The roads were free of robbers. Crime was dealt with promptly, which made people wary. There were times in history, from northern China to Persia, when you could travel thousands of miles carrying gold without being stopped, as long as you didn't violate the yat. Occasionally Khan convened special councils called Kurataito to decide major laws, who would succeed him, where he would go for conquest, whether any changes would be made to tax collection. But to ordinary people, Yasa was always there as an invisible order. Here's an interesting fact. In Yasa, lying was considered one of the greatest sins, because the Mongols had no time for lies. One wrong order could throw an entire army off course. One false rumor could cause chaos. For them, honesty was the weapon that kept order, more powerful than the sword. And you, a stranger in this land, can clearly sense. This is no place for political games. No law, no crooks, no lawyers who know how to bend the rules. Here, you either do the right thing, or you disappear. When night falls, the campfires glow, and the caravan rests from its journey. You know that you are in the midst of a strange machine. Crude but efficient, invisible but exacting. The law here needs no prisons, no offices. It lives in memory, on horseback, and in the eyes of those who have lost a limb for disobeying an order. And the scariest thing, no one complained about it. Part 11, Siege and Conquest. You might think the Mongols were all about riding horses, shooting arrows, and conquering the endless steppes. But you'd be surprised. When faced with a Western, Eastern, or Central Asian stronghold, they didn't charge in like hungry wolves. They observed, they analyzed, and then they attacked. Throughout the 13th century, the Mongols faced not just cavalry, but stone walls, watchtowers, and well-trained garrison troops. And they learned from China, they learned how to fire. From Persia, they learned how to dig tunnels, cut off water. From the Muslims, they learned how to make crude explosives, build battering rams. And from the battlefield itself, they learned patience. A siege begins like a chess game. The Mongols set up camp, far from arrow range. They make no noise, no provocations. They circle around, looking for the weakest spot. They watch every patrol, every soldier who goes to the bathroom. Then they send out an invitation. Surrender. And if you refuse, the siege tightens like a rope. You don't see them hurrying. In contrast to their extraordinary speed on the steppe, in a siege they act like a cold knife to the neck. Not moving, but suffocating. They set up catapults. They drew fire to the walls. They threw skulls into the city not to kill, but to spread fear, disease, and bad luck. They didn't break down the gates with human power. They made people open them from the inside. And when the gates opened, whether from panic, betrayal, or hunger, they poured in like a breaking wave. There was no strategy, no clear command. Just survival instinct on one side and the broken screams on the other. But what is more remarkable is this. Capturing the city was not the end. The Mongols did not abandon it. They reorganized. You will see officers carrying not swords but lists of the population. They check the professions. Blacksmiths, doctors, scribes, keep them. Their fate is no longer mentioned. They collect food, redistribute the territory. Within a few days, the Mongol flag flies over the walls, not as a trophy, but as a sign of the beginning of control. Captured cities were not destroyed indiscriminately. If there were good roads, deep wells, functioning markets, all were kept. The Mongols did not need to destroy, they needed to function. And this made them unlike any other army of their time. Both stormers and documents from merchants recount that, just weeks after the capture, the city still had an open market, street vendors, and night guards, but this time speak in Mongolian. And if you are a survivor of a siege, you don't know if you are a victim or have become part of the empire. Not an end, it is a beginning. The Mongol conquest was not a pointless fire of destruction. It was a great wind that swept away resistance, to rebuild on cleared ground, stronger, more orderly, more submissive. You see no victory monument. There are no inscriptions that say the year we took this city. The Mongols did not need to mention their victories, because they knew the next city was waiting. Part 12. Post-conquest reform and maintenance. Victory for most ancient armies was the end. But for the Mongols, it was only the beginning. When the city fell, the gates were thrown open, and the Mongol tricolor fluttered in the wind. There was no feasting or triumphal singing. There was just work. Lots of work. When the dust settles, you don't see warriors celebrating. You see scribes quietly entering. The Mongols called them tambushins, tax collectors, mark makers, shapers of society into a new order. First thing they did, take a census. How many people were left? Who were craftsmen? Who could read and write? Who had worked for the old regime, not for revenge, but to reorganize? The Mongols didn't need to destroy everything to prove their power. They just needed to turn the whole machine around to rotate on Khan's axis. You'll see men with red cloth tied to their sleeves. They don't carry weapons, but their power is as heavy as a sword. They decide who gets to keep their homes, who has to move, who becomes the new tax collector, who gets sent to another region to help build. The old order breaks down. The new order emerges. So quickly you think it's always been that way. The market reopened within days. The old currency was accepted, but now a percentage had to be paid to the tax office. Roads were cleared. Bridges were repaired. Everything was as if KHN had planned it all along. One thing that surprises outsiders: the Mongols don't force you to learn their language. They learn yours. For tax collection, for trade, for writing letters. Interpreters are employed. Calligraphers are retained. Official correspondence is sent in the local script. But with the Great Conceal, when there was a dispute between the old inhabitants and the Mongols, a form of double trial was used. A local official and a Mongol judge sat together. Both had to agree. Otherwise, the case would be referred to a higher court. Surprisingly, the rate of wrongful convictions was almost zero, because here, no one had more power than the law. The Mongols did not abolish their local religion. They rebuilt temples, exempted the clergy from taxes, and sometimes even consulted priests in choosing the day to make decisions. Not because of superstition, but because they knew how to calm the people with faith. In some cities, residents reported that less than a month after the occupation, the city was cleaner, more orderly, and surprisingly, safer than it had been under previous rule. Robbers were publicly hanged. Corrupt officials were flogged, regardless of their background. Merchants from far and wide began to flock to the city, for they knew that only when the law was strict would gold flow with peace of mind. You see, the Mongols were more than just horsemen. They were organizers. They rewrote the structure of society in a matter of weeks, without the need for academicians, parliaments, or cumbersome And so you live in a city that was once occupied, but no longer feels occupied, because the empire didn't just ride through it, took root. A month, a year, a decade passed. The new generation grew up without remembering the old flag. All they knew was, there were people on horseback collecting taxes on the right days. There were regular markets. There were letters delivered to the west. And if they broke the law, justice would come, swift and sharp as an arrow. Empires are not built of bricks. They are built of order. They are built of the ability to turn chaos into function. And for the Mongols, that was more important than victory. Part 13, Borders and Legends. There was a time when people from Europe to Central Asia used to say, wherever you point to east, that's Mongolia. But where does the maelstrom of hooves stop? The answer is, no one knows. You stand at the frontier, perhaps an unfamiliar mountain range, a mist-shrouded valley, or a desert where the sands never sleep. Here the Mongol flag does not fly as brightly as it did in the heart of the empire, but quietly, a leather strap tied to a dry branch, a few stones arranged in a triangle, a sign that only the cavalry understand. This is the edge of the wind. In such frontiers, it was not Mongol warriors who ruled, it was rumors. Tales as vague as morning mist, of a general who never died, a cavalry riding white wolves, horse tracks that left no trace, and letters that never arrived but were answered. You'll meet Muslim, Buddhist, and even Taoist monks, all surviving under the shadow of the empire, but practicing their faiths in their own unique ways. They exchange knowledge, scriptures, medicines, and rumors. One old monk once said, I saw a Mongol general praying to 3 different religions just to be sure he wasn't making a mistake. Here, the truth is unclear. No one knows for sure who the local magistrate is. No one remembers the last time Cain sent a letter here, but everyone knows. Do not rebel, because even though the empire no longer sends regular cavalry, one false sound, and the hooves will be back. There are forests that people dare not enter, despite the precious forest products. They say that this is where a Mongol army once got lost, never to return. The neighing of horses and the sound of bows still echo each time the wind changes. Is it true? Who knows? But on the borders of the Mongol Empire, faith and fear are one and the same thing. The villagers built small shrines to the faceless riders. They worshipped not their ancestors, but the unnamed riders, because they believed it was the only way to keep the village from disappearing overnight. There is a mountain called Karakon's echo. Whenever you shout, the echo returns. Not like you. It speaks in a deep Kayan-like voice. Children dare not climb it. Old people avoid mentioning it. But sometimes, Mongol traders still stop and bow silently to the mountainside, as if listening for new orders from someone long dead. And then, in the nameless lands, you meet the stateless. Not Mongol, not native. They speak 5 languages. They wear patched clothes from every culture. They eat goat like the Muslims, drink fermented wine like the steppes, and wear old Chinese tunics. They are the remnants of conquests, and living witnesses to an empire that once stretched like a dream. On this frontier, you don't need to know exactly who rules. Just remember this: people stay on the right path, not because of guards, but because of memories. Memories of winds that carry the scent of smoke from 1,000 miles away, of horses that never rest, and eyes that never smile. The empire no longer extends, but its breath remains. In every fireside tale, every lullaby of the nightly cavalry, and in the eerie silence of the frontier. Part 14, Remembrance and Legacy. As the last smoke from the campfire dissipates into the air, as the 3-tasseled flag is rolled up, and the sound of horse hooves fades into memory, one wonders, what remains after the Mongol Empire? No pyramids, no basilicas, no majestic temples. You won't find a single monument named after Genghis Khan erected in marble. The Mongols didn't build monuments. They built roads. The road from Beijing to Baghdad, from Kiev to the arid Gobi deserts, was traveled by merchants, monks, artisans, and spies. You didn't need a passport. Just carry a KH unmarked pass, and the world opened up like an endless bazaar. Many called them barbarians, but that was the word of the defeated. For in the darkness of the burned libraries, no one saw the Arab doctors brought to Karakoram to teach medicine. No one wrote about how they brought Persian astronomy to the prairies, or how they sent Chinese craftsmen to open pottery workshops in the West. The Mongol Empire was more than horses and blood. It was a symphony of hundreds of cultures, forcibly harmonized, but truly harmonized by not trying to assimilate. The Han kept their Chinese characters. The Persians still read the Quran, the Russians still wore fur hats against the snow, but they all paid taxes to the same people and were protected by the same order. You may hate it, but there is no denying it. For a century, travel across Eurasia was safer than ever before. Even Marco Polo wrote, admiringly, of how a maiden carrying gold could travel from China to the Crimea without being robbed. The empire was also the birthplace of a modern form of communication, a post station spread across the continent. Ride to the post, change horses, deliver the letter. They say, news travels faster than the wind, and sometimes even faster than ideology. You don't see jihad, you see tolerance. An empire that will let you believe in any god you want as long as you don't make trouble. In an age when Europe was consumed by the pyre and the ecclesiastical code, a monk, a scholar, and a cleric could sit by a fire on the steppe without fear of a knife at their throat. And then, like all things, the empire collapsed. Not because of defeat on the battlefield, but because of division. The descendants of Kayhan fought over succession. The Kayhan split like cracks in a giant iceberg. From a common heart, Mongolia broke into 4 poles. The Golden Horde, the Ilkhanate. But what do you see when you look back? Not a pile of ashes, but the shape of a world stitched together. After the Mongols passed, the map was no longer a collection of fragments. It became a tapestry. The stitches may have been crude, but they connected east and west with a thread of movement, of trade, and of memory. And now, your person living centuries later still see those traces in the drum beats of the cavalry, in the upright posture of the nomads, in the concepts of passage and speed of information, in the very interconnectedness that the world today calls globalization. The empire is gone, but you can't deny it. It passed here. Great thing. Here's the outro for the video, written in a formal, epic tone but still emotional and philosophical. True to the spirit of the Gaitan Chisi Koyan Gunchanu, the goal was to leave a deep impression on the viewer and encourage them to think, and even come back to watch again. The horses have stopped, the dust has settled, but the echoes of the Mongol Empire have not been silenced. History is not just in books, it is in the night wind that smells of ashes, in the silent footsteps of a people who once rode across the world, and in the questions that never get old. What is power? How much does freedom cost? And where is the line between conquest and survival? You've just lived a day in the Mongol Empire, but this is just the beginning. Because behind every page of history, there are mysteries, tragedies, and untold lights. If you feel something rising inside you, that is the drop of water from the source, from history, flowing to the soul. Leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel to continue exploring lost civilizations and lessons never taught in school. And if one day you hear the sound of horse hooves in your dream, remember, history is not dead. It is just waiting for someone to tell it.